You're watching Analysts After Dark, an underground hideaway where insatiably curious analysts examine provocative project problems, share salacious secrets, and establish a covert network of co-conspirators. Step into the dark with your hosts, AJ Hawley and Steve Jones.
Well, hello, Steve.
Hey, AJ, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm dandy, as always.
How you doing on those New Year's resolutions?
Well, I don't make as much of a resolution out of it. I think we talked before. I like to have a goal, but it's not necessarily a day-to-day thing. So I still have, I'm still resolute, but I don't make the resolution.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah,
How about you?
I read an article today that said that most people have already failed their New Year's resolutions. And so it lasts for about 23 days. And then today is obviously day 24. And so then last year, only 9% of the resolutions were made. So that was a fun data experiment.
Yeah, that's definitely not a whole lot of effort getting there.
Yeah, the article that I was reading, it said that at 21 days, or it takes 21 days to form a pattern, kind of a deal. That was just based upon a surgeon. And he said, I've noticed that when I do plastic surgery on my patients, it takes them about 21 days for them to realize that that's their face now and move forward. And then that just became part of the lexicon forever. It's kind of just been based on that. All articles posted that. It was like, well, it takes 21 days. And I think every blog that you have read in the last month has said, if you want to do this, it takes 21 days to start a pattern. But the true answer was it takes between 6 and 294 days. I was like, what a wide range.
So the common reference is based on one person's empirical data points?
That's it. That's it.
That's it. That's crazy.
Yeah. So I would say not a whole lot of data to be analyzed in that situation.
No. Sounds like it's a lot of outliers.
Which, speaking of outliers, if you have read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, when he talks about those 5,000 hours, is a very similar situation. So the 5,000 hours was a kind of gut feeling that he had on that based upon some evidence that he had collected. And at that point, it hasn't been found out as like actual truth, true facts, but it's, again, the standard for these 5,000 hours to get good at any one thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. Fun stuff.
That almost kind of reminds me of Sean Akers, what is it, The Happiness Advantage?
Mm-hmm.
Where Harvard study, they're looking at all the data and you see everybody on the plot points and then they find a few outliers. And those are the ones they start to measure.
Sure.
Because they're the ones that are different. They're not like everybody else. Excellent.
Yeah, I think a lot of that happens in the corporate world, right? We see that every day where it's you start putting a measurement out there and then everybody starts to align towards that measurement, right? And they game the system a little bit that way. Or they'll say, hey, now that we're going to measure how many user stories you happen to write this month, they're like, oh, okay, great. When you were creating big, long user stories before that were all encapsulating this, and maybe you wrote, let's say 15. Now you're like, nope, I'm going to do 100, but they're all very small. Yep. And so your productivity went from 15 to 100 and overnight, basically. And all you really did was just take what you were currently doing and chunk it down into smaller, more granular items.
Yep. And that's one of the challenges with data and measuring. Once people know that there's a measure and it's tied to something, they find a way to manipulate it.
Yep. Well, that makes me excited to talk about today's guest. So today with us, we have Nash Bober. He is the Director of Delivery and Data Intelligence at Keyrus. He brings a wealth of expertise across various industries and technical stacks, the unique blend of consulting and in-house experience, in both business and technical domains. He excels in data strategy, back-end and front-end development, agile methodologies, and managing people, processes, and projects. So without further ado,
Hey guys, AJ, Steve, how's it going?
hi Nash, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
Welcome. So it's good to see you. I'll let everybody in on the little secret. So Nash and I used to work together way back when you first started your consulting career.
Yeah.
And he was just a baby consultant. And then he looked up to me incorrectly, by the way. So just,
You're tall.
Well, that's what
Yeah, it was the height.
It was the height. Yeah, that's all. No, you've heard of the Future Stars program, I think is what they were calling it, right? And you're starting out as pretty much fresh out of college, I believe.
It was, yeah. We came out, we had like a cohort. What was there? Maybe like 6 or 8 of us or something like that.
Mm.
That was a really cool experience because I think, we kind of latched on to you guys as like the mentors for that program and kind of were able to figure out, what we wanted to do with our career, because there was like the project management aspect, there was the data, there's like app dev. And so we got to kind of touch a lot of those different things. So I think that was a pretty unique experience that was nice because, coming at us, book learning is different than real life learning. So that was really nice for us to kind of understand what we were going to get into before you kind of like sign your check for the rest of your career.
Well, and then you started straight out of the gate with data. You're like, nope, I'm doing data.
Yeah. I think, for me, I think it was understanding that I wanted a hard skill in some level. And I was never, my curriculum at OU was very like C# heavy. A lot of coding and development of that way. And it never clicked with me. I've never been that kind of person who could really develop to that level. So, coming across like SQL was still a technical language, and it was still a way to kind of differentiate myself. And it came a lot easier than, trying to figure out how I was going to, keep up with someone who's developing applications and things like that.
So you mean SQL?
Yeah. The layman's, if you're a layman's person, which I will tell you, on the poll I did on my LinkedIn, I had like over 100 responses. I was pretty happy with that. And like a third of people responded that they say SQL. And I was actually kind of shocked. I was not expecting that large of a sample saying SQL, but that just a third of people were wrong, as all I took from that.
It's kind of like if and GIF. There's one way to say it, and if you say it the other way, you're wrong.
Yeah, that's it. There's no gray for me. It's black and white.
Yeah. So what's the answer?
The answer is GIF.
No, well, that's where we diverge. It's GIF.
It's no way.
No.
Yeah.
Because it's graphical interchange format is what it stands for, not graphical.
Well, maybe that's another poll. Maybe that's a data point. That's a data point we can collect.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
That'll be part of this show. We're going to put it as a poll on Analysts After Dark on our LinkedIn page. We're going to find out for ourselves what that is. And I'll share that with you. And I'll say, is it GIF or GIF? And then I'm also going to put like another one. If you say it as GIF, what's your age range? So I feel like that's going to play a part in the demographics.
I did have someone in the comments on my post for SQL try to cop out and say, they were an old soul. They were an 80s kid and they grew up saying SQL. So maybe there's truth to the demographic piece of that.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
I'm in that demographic and I still say SQL.
Steve's a good one. That's why, you got a good one here.
That's why he's on the show.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, because if he said SQL, like we have, criteria for our hosts. Sure. Yeah, and if you say SQL, then it's like, sorry, you're SOL.
Yeah. Unless you eat liver treats.
Oh yeah, that's true. Amy did come in and she did a taste test of dog treats live on the show, which was entertaining for sure.
There's a lot of protein in dog food, I've heard. So I've never partaken, but I've heard.
It was freeze-dried liver, so that's what you're into.
Okay.
Treating food as data, not so tasty.
No.
So one of the questions that we ask everybody is, what is your favorite after dark activity? And like so many others talking about data, you have also suggested that sleeping is your favorite.
Yeah, I'm boring. There's other than tonight, there are two places you're gonna find me at about 8 p.m. If I put my daughter down to bed, it's probably sleeping in her bed still after I've fallen asleep, or it is going to be sleeping on the couch after I've turned off whatever I'm trying to convince myself to watch on TV. So, yeah, I think your moms would probably say nothing good happens after midnight. So nothing good happens after dark anyway. Just go to sleep on the couch. That's my advice.
Yeah, I joke that my wife is solar powered, and after the sun sets, I've got about an hour and a half, and then after that, it's over.
Yeah.
And then in the summertime, it's just not even just a little winter hours.
Yeah, it's a little easier. I think it's a little easier, right, when it's warm outside and the sun stays out much later in the summer. It's easier to stay up a little bit later, but man, these cold Midwest winters we have here, it's like you give me a blanket on the couch, good night. That's all I need.
Well, we're definitely glad to have you. Data analysis is one of those things that I think I even mentioned in the summary of this show was that it comes late, right? It's always an afterthought. We think about reporting and things like that as the end of the project once we have everything built. But I think a lot of the things that we probably should do is consider that stuff up front. So how are we going to migrate data, interact with the data, and then what data needs do we have at the end? So do you want to talk a little bit about your experience in running projects and some of the things that you would coach from an afterthought perspective to more of an upfront scenario?
Yeah. I think, a lot of times or most times you're absolutely right. Reporting is kind of it's an afterthought and it's kind of the byproduct of your entire project, but it's also a lot of times the most important thing because the sexy dashboard and the glitz and the glamour, that's what the stakeholders are after. So, they don't necessarily understand you spent X weeks building a data warehouse and you're connecting all these pipelines, you're cleansing all my data. They don't care how long that took you or how hard that was. What they want to know is why is this Tableau, Power BI, whatever your front end is, why is this dashboard taking forever to load? It's it's slow as hell, it's just spinning, what's going on? So I think a lot of what you can do there and a lot of that analysis that you're expected to do at the end can be kind of done when you're modeling in the front end. So as you kind of talk to your end users and you understand from them, like, what reports do you want to see at the end of this? What is kind of the business objective as far as, okay, you want to see how many t-shirts you sold in, the Southwest last year. Okay, well, now as I'm modeling that, I'm keeping that in mind, some of these use cases and saying, well, now we're going to need to have this date table. We know we're going to want to report by geography. So I need to make sure that we've got that, modeled correctly. We know that we need to do a lot of measures around our revenue, count of inventory, things like that. So I think it's important to kind of have some of the KPIs and measures and, reporting use cases that are coming at the end of the project in mind as you're kind of modeling and organizing all of your, your work on the back end and the front of the project from a technical standpoint. And then you get into your data governance, and data dictionaries and glossaries and things, and how are you going to define these terms and blah blah blah. And I think a lot of that is where I would look to your typical like a BA or a data analyst to really kind of run that and drive that and be able to elicit that information from your stakeholders.
Governance seems to be a place where people miss out a lot, especially on the business side. They just have ideas, but they don't realize there's a need for specificity in what the reports are going to look like and the definitions of everything. And
right.
What do you call it? Oh, it's just a shipped product. Is it really, or do you need to know the variations?
Right. And even with that, you talk about, let's just run with the word product. What you consider a product, Steve, what AJ considers a product, what I call a product, could be three different things from three different corners of the business. So yeah, to your point is like, we have to find, who is the data owner, who is telling us this is a product, period. Okay, we got that guy. Now we need to document that, you know, in whatever, it's Excel, you know, we can do real lo-fi with it. This needs to be documented so that you can point to that later on down the line when you're building a shipped product dashboard and someone's like, what the hell's a product? And you're like, this is what it is. And you can point to that. So yeah, super important to document your definitions on those things.
I was going to add, when you're talking about the geography, you know, a lot of people think of, well, I know what the geography is, but then if you say in the Southwest, now you're talking about territory, not necessarily geography, right? So I might have this by, well, is that by state? Is that by zip code? Is it by some other, you know, factor that we haven't even thought about, like your own territory that you've come up with that says this is what we consider Midwest or Southwest or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's always been a struggle when I've been doing things like on the sales side. We want to see reporting, but we need to have territories. And it's like, well, we're either going to have to build this ourselves or we have to have a third party come in here and tell us, because on the US side, I think there's, I don't know, 60,000 different postal codes.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get into Canada, there's like 1 million. And so that can totally skew your data aspects 100% when you're talking about like, now I've got performant data, right? Or I don't, because I'm looking at 1,000 or 1 million different records to find out what the postal codes are, all this to assess what the Northwest region would be like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what you're talking, you know, what you're talking about is what I would call like the granularity of your data. So absolutely, you know, a great example is just that, you know, let's say we get all the way through this project and we've built our table at the state level. So it doesn't, you know, we have no data below that. We're just getting you at the state. And then you've got one of your account managers, one of your salespeople comes to you and he's like, hey, I have, you know, I need to know about this county in Arizona. And you're like, okay, that's great. You know, you should have told me that about 6 months ago when we were designing this and building this, because it's not happening now. You know, so yeah, it's like, that's super important to know exactly what you're getting into at all these levels.
Granularity is a lot of fun when they come after the fact and say, I need more refined. That doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You're going to have to wait 3 to 6 months until we get some kind of data change and capture something more refined.
Yep.
It just doesn't exist.
Yep. Yeah. And then you're getting into cycle releases now. Like you said, you know, if you're trying to run agile and you say, yeah, you know, we'll put it in the backlog, maybe we'll get to that in the next sprint. That's what everybody wants to hear, right? But guess what? There's probably a million other things in your backlog right now. And now you're trying to prioritize and get that out the door. But, you know, now it's a stakeholder battle. Like, who's going to win out on, do you need county level data or do you need some other kind of enhancement that's been asked of you? So it's always something. I feel like data, you know, I'm going to be my own sob story here, but data is often, kind of, no one really cares about data, right? You're just kind of like the punching bag. IT in general, you're just kind of the punching bag. Like, why isn't this done? How hard could this be to do this? But a lot of people don't really understand when they ask for a simple change like that. They just say, I just want to see county level data. Just give me it at the county level. And you have to explain to them, like, that is going to take so much time to find that data, you know, get it in the format we need, transform it, munge it all up, get it into the right tables, you know, yada, 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 test it. They just want to, I don't care. Just, you know, put it on the dashboard. Give me the county level. So I feel like a lot of times you get beat down by people who don't really understand what's going to have to go into all of that work.
And the other part is by date, when they give you a date range. Okay, so what transaction type? Are you talking about shipped? Are you talking about received? Are you talking about sold? When you start getting into date ranges, they don't realize that there's a whole host of potential fields that could be used. So you need that specificity.
Yep.
And they just don't realize it. Oh, I just want this. Oh, well, I've got 6 different data points that might be the one you're looking for. Tell me more.
Right. And asking those right questions too about, you know, I want data from all time. It's like, do you need data from 5 years ago? You know, because that's going to slow down your report. Or, you know, something I'm working on right now on a project is some like real-time data, near real-time. You know, do you really need your data every 1 minute? Is someone staring and looking at the screen, refreshing every 30 seconds? Maybe, maybe not. But if you ask me to do it, we'll get it done. But yeah, time is a whole nother beast.
So I've heard several keywords so far. So you talked about KPIs and metrics. So what that is, you talked about specificity, you talked about granularity. I've also heard refresh rate or data freshness, we'll call it. So those are 4 things. Are there any other criteria that you would look at to say, this is how I would look at, let's say, these 6 things, and these are the items that I would have on top of what we just listed?
As far as just trying to get my like what I would ask of an analyst to help me get done.
Sure. So if I'm looking at this and saying I've got a checklist of items, and these are the 5 things that I must have in order to look at any sort of data project,
Yeah.
what items would you kind of list on top of what we just talked about?
Yeah, I think those are all good. Probably, I think a good way to wrap a lot of those up would probably be like scope management. So yeah, what's the scope of this? Not only from like a time perspective, all the different attributes and things we need to bring in here, but I'm sure as analysts, you guys are well aware of like scope creep. So making sure that when you do define your project and what you're getting into, you've got a real strong, project manager or scrum master, however you're running these things, to make sure you're staying within that scope, because it's very easy to kind of blast outside of that. But yeah, I think, how often, what data do you need? How often do you need it refreshed? What kind of deliverables are we looking for out of this? What are some dashboards you need, or the kind of documentation you're looking for? And then, yeah, probably just like what kind of staff I'm going to need on that project. Is it, heavy backend? I'm going to need a lot of architects and engineers. So am I going to need front end people doing some dashboard development? Is this more of an exercise on strategy and governance, kind of understanding the players that are going to be involved and making sure that we can kind of align all of them and get them where they need to be?
You also used a great word earlier when you said we have to munge in all that data. And so is munginess a category that you would consider into all this?
Yeah. And I don't want to have to Google that word later and realize it's there's like a terrible connotation or something. So I hope I use that correctly.
Why we do this after dark, during
Yeah, it
instead
is.
of doing business hours. It's like, just in case.
I've only heard in the context of data.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you need to define your transformation logic and have that documented. So, obviously you've got your source systems, and that data is just raw. There's been nothing done to it. So as you bring that into, whatever warehouse or a data lake, or, however you are ultimately hosting all of that data, understanding those business rules and the business logic that happens between that is important. Like if you, for some reason, you want to filter out all Florida sales, making sure that you need to have that filter on your sales as it's coming from your source system into your warehouse, and then documenting that. So then when someone on the end of it, you have an analyst who's doing some trend analysis, and they're saying, I don't see any sales for Florida. And you can point to that and say, well, actually, that's some business logic that they don't want to see any, Florida sales. Mostly because I'm sure a lot of the revenue in Florida right now has been funded into a campaign that is no longer happening, which we'll get into later. But that's where your tax dollars are.
Yeah. Well, luckily we have tourists here that help with the taxes. Like
Disney World, right? Okay.
Yeah. So I did a quick Urban Dictionary search, and I think we should probably find a different word to use instead of munginess. But
all right.
I think.
So is there a difference between munging and wrangling?
Well, I know for some of the data projects that I've worked on, just the formatting, right? So you get some formatting from somebody, and now you have to transform all of that, right? Because you've got an address in there that's in all one field in database A, but in database B, you've got addresses that are separated out into 6 different columns. And then some cases you need to have you've got the state spelled out, or you're using the state abbreviations, like all that kind of stuff, where you have to go in and correct all of the names or all of the addresses.
Yeah, definitely. I think doing a lot of that type like fuzzy matching and that kind of transformation and wrangling is super important, because like you said, I mean, chances that your schemas from 2 different sources you're trying to bring together in one warehouse are the same is, slim to none. So you're going to have to do a lot of those mapping type exercises where you're pulling those columns and saying this is this is street name and this is street name and this is city, and making sure you're getting those together in your new warehouse.
So you used a term a second ago called fuzzy match. Could you describe that a little bit?
Yeah. So fuzzy matching is basically a lot of what your fancy MDM tools do. I think Excel even has a plugin that'll do it for you, but essentially there's some kind of crazy. I find him that crazy, but there's an algorithm that's going on behind the scenes where it's essentially attributing a score to like two columns you've decided. So if you've got, column A is Steve Jones, and then you've got column B is Steven Jones, it'll assign a score, maybe saying, hey, this is like a 95% match. This is probably the exact same data point. And then, it'll kind of extrapolate that out. So fuzzy match is an official term. We can use that. I do know that for a fact. So no worries there.
Yeah.
Steve Jones is a bad example, though. There are far too many of us.
There is, that's not a unique identifier for sure. I don't want to use that one.
But I mean, that brings up a good point, because there's a lot of things where you've got a Robert, you've got a Bob, you've got Bobby, all these different names for an individual, and they could be saying the same thing. So when you're looking at what might be a fuzzy match of, let's say, contact records, then now you've got, well, I'm pretty sure, but now it can't just go on these two attributes alone. It has to look at maybe an email address or maybe some other factor, zip code or phone number, something else that's going to be identifiable that says, here's exactly what this is going to be.
Yeah, definitely. I think the more in a situation like that, the more data points you can gather and see, address is a great one, email addresses, things like that, to help kind of create the context around, is this the same data point? Yeah, I mean, your probability of your match rate is going to go way up.
And you do have to assume that people entered it correctly the first time, which
I
found out does not happen.
Yeah. Garbage in, garbage out. I think applies. a lot of I talk about this on the daily at work. A lot of my job, a lot of that transformation, a lot of that data cleansing that we have to do. If your processes up front, looking at you, Salesforce, if your processes are super tight and your salespeople aren't fat fingering or putting a Steve Jones and a Steven Jones, even though it's the same thing because they didn't do the diligence. If that's all cleaned up on the front end, your job as a data person to get that data out and into a dashboard or whatever is really, really easy, because you've already, the work's been done on the upfront. So making sure your processes in the front are as tight as they can be is really just going to benefit you, down the line, A through Z.
So not Salesforce, but the Microsoft Dynamics version of that quite a bit. So that's my career path. And so then a lot of the data that I will coach my clients on is like, well, it's like, put this in a field. Like, well, you could put it in a field, but you could also, it's like in a text box, right? But you could also put this into an actual drop-down list or a lookup or something like that, that gives me the opportunity to take that and standardize it. And now when you go in and look through this record, it's always going to be the same thing versus having some of that, right?
Yeah. Open text fields are like the bane of my existence. And anytime someone has the ability to type, inevitably they're going to mess it up. It's like the law of averages.
I just want a comments field. That's it. Notes.
Yeah. Let me just slap stuff in there.
And that's fine. I don't mind the comments or the notes field if you're not going to do any reporting on them. But when they go, oh, can you extract that out? It's like, well, I can't. We can use tools like AI tools that will do that, but they're only going to do that to a certain extent of clarity anyway.
Right.
So sure, if it's something that's going to tell you about the, let's say, personal experience or the individual response that you have, like how did Nash feel in his personality when he was calling in, that's something that if you're never going to report on that, you can add that in there as just commentary to say, here's the sentiment. But we can do sentiment analysis with AI now. So then that doesn't even need to be something that you can include. Right?
Yeah. And I have done a sentiment analysis project, and even that, right? That's, you're relying on a machine, and you can tweak your parameters, you can train your data, you can do all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, humans, you really kind of you have to be able to read that, right? You have to be able to read the sarcasm in a comment, or you need to be able to understand how, someone was saying something, some slang term or something like that AI really hasn't caught up to yet. And I'm sure
It's going to
with
get us
enough training
canceled.
data and Google scraping, they're probably scraping this conversation right now. So they're learning, they learned munge, they learned that. So
We're going to get canceled because, Nash keeps using that word, and now, YouTube's going to flag us for adult content.
they are.
Not
They
again.
are.
Jeez.
So then let's talk a little bit about some of the tools that you use to do your data analysis job. So what are the things that you would use on an average day?
Yeah. So average day, any kind of database querying tool that you like to use, stick with the Microsoft, you can use like SSMS to get in there and query your database. We use a lot of dbeaver, which is like a open source database querying platform. So anything like that, really to kind of get in there and understand your data and do a lot of that kind of digging and diving to find the answers you're looking for. And then on the other end of that, we just kind of assume your data is there. It's already, maybe cleaned up for you, and you just got to build some data sets on top of that and do some visualizations. Tableau is, obviously super top of mind for a lot of people. Power BI, Einstein Analytics with Salesforce. So anything like that really on the front end. But honestly, like it's the world's most popular BI tool, Excel. I mean, 9 times out of 10, you could probably just pull something into Excel and do exactly what you need to do. And it's not sexy and it's not going to blow anyone's, hair back with what you've done there, but like, it's just super efficient. And that's why it's still around. So, you don't have to use like the greatest, latest, coolest tech out there. It's just really whatever gets the job done and gets the answer out there, because most people anyway just want it in Excel. Like they're just like, just export that data and give it to me in Excel.
Yeah. You mentioned governance earlier too, but when you have that situation where someone can just export that into Excel, how do you maintain governance?
Yeah. You don't. Long story short. I kind of roll with my outlook on that is I'm going to deliver this to you in our blessed format. If it's a Tableau dashboard or it's an Excel that's sitting on a SharePoint list somewhere, whatever the data team has blessed, like that's kind of where the buck stops as far as I'm going to support it. AJ, you come to me with a question about the data. Yeah, let's talk this out. The second you kind of take it out of our ecosystem and you kind of do your own thing with it, that's on you. So, the data warehouse or whatever, your organization uses is the source of truth. You kind of pull it out of there. You start doing your own manipulations inside of Excel and things like that. That's fine. But, if you try to butt that back up against what I've given you, it's just kind of your opinion at that point.
Yeah. Question is, what you said, it's the source of truth. Problem is, like you said, people pull in Excel, start doing other things with it, and they present that to management quite often. And
yeah,
sorry, that's not supported. I don't know what the hell you did, but I can show all the controls that we have in place for what's in the warehouse or what's on the dashboard. Anything else? That's on you.
Yep. Yeah. And unfortunately, perception is reality, though, right? So once that person gets that data in their hands and they see, like, wow, we had $10 billion in revenue last year, and you're like, actually, someone just added an extra zero. It's not 10 billion. They're like, I don't care. Like, I saw it. That's the truth now. So now you're like, yeah, how do you combat that? How do you explain to them, how you reached your answer in the warehouse? And it just gets super messy. So, yeah, I mean, it's a bad answer, but it's kind of the right answer. It's like, there really is no way to govern it once people decide, unless you just completely shut that down, right? You say you can't export data. You can't get it out of, our ecosystem. This is the only place you can get it.
People find a way, though.
They do. Yeah. There's a will, there's a way for sure.
I need to do something with this. I'll find a way. It's not going to help you, though.
And I think that goes back into any of the projects that we've probably all been on, is the turnaround time that it takes. The data team's obviously going to be busy. And, you said that you had your own sob story earlier, but it's not just you, because every aspect of, I think, any project feels that way. The QA teams feels like they are overlooked. The training team feels that they're overlooked. the BA team feels like, hey, we're pointing out all these issues and no one's listening to us. The devs are like, everyone's dumping everything on us and we don't have, we've got way too much work. I feel like everybody has that level of contention around, hey, here's my thing, and this is the exact conversation that I think we should all probably have more often is how do we make, even if I don't do your job, Nash, how do I make your job easier? Because now if I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about Nash. I'm also thinking about the QA folks and then the training team. And now the training team has, let's say, production ready data or something like that, ready to go in an environment that's safe that they can go in and it's a test environment, et cetera. But it looks good enough that we can actually do feasible reporting on it or something like that that's allowing us to see that information.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you said it. It's at the end of the day, it's a team effort, right? So as we can all make each other's lives a little bit easier, it's only going to make everyone happier in the end of the day. So yeah, it takes a village.
And a lot of times people are not happy with reporting in general.
No,
It's easier to
it's the 80-20 rule. You're only gonna make 80% of the people happy. 20% you're just gonna have to deal with it. And generally that's okay. Unless that 20% is the silent majority. But usually you're all right.
That's fair.
can't please everybody.
Yeah.
Well, I think that thank you. That's been very helpful information. I've got a couple of questions for you, and I think that we can open this up to any questions that we have in the hotline. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next segment and see what calls we have on the hotline.
Let's eavesdrop on the BA hotline and see what provocative project problems are awaiting us. Is your project in hot water? Operators are standing by. Ooh, that's hot.
All right. Welcome back.
I
Yeah,
laugh every time.
that's so sultry. I love
I
that.
know. So one of the questions that we have is, how do data analysts differ from business analysts?
That's a good question. And I think that, honestly, to me, it's a lot of semantics. I think a data analyst is a business analyst, and I think a business analyst is a data analyst, depending on your organization, totally. But to be maybe drill in a little bit more, where I see that could differ is, data analysts are probably going to have a little bit more of a technical edge to them. Maybe they're in there, they're writing that SQL, they're building some dashboards, they're doing some analysis on those dashboards. They're able to kind of QA, a user saying this report is wrong, this data looks wrong. How did you arrive to this answer? But I think that at the end of the day, they should both be doing the same thing. Data analysts should be able to ask the right questions and document those things and create, those user stories and cards and things that people are working on. Just as, I would expect a business analyst to be able to do a lot of that legwork, maybe not to the level, and that's why you have developers and people on the team with you, but they should be able to also, kind of get into the weeds and do a lot of those things. So kind of semantics, kind of the same thing.
So either one of us could go in and have that data analyst role, but you're looking really for that. When you mentioned SSMS earlier, so that's SQL Server Management Studio, right? So you're actually going in and you're writing some of those queries, maybe doing stored procedures.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Things like that to start, move data, get data prepped, etc.
Yeah, and then you get into titles, or everyone is wearing tons of hats, right? So then you get into titles like are you a data engineer, and you're really hardcore in there doing the transformations and all of that logic. Are you a BI developer, and maybe you're just like a Tableau whiz, and that's what you do. But all of those roles, depending on the size of your team, maybe you do have dedicated BAs in there, something like that. But more oftentimes than not, I find myself like I have to gather my own requirements. I have to ask the right questions. I have to set up UAT sessions. So I'm doing a lot of that BA requirements analyst type work, even though that I might not have that title slapped on my HR records. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of doing a lot of different things.
So in your case, you're both. You're the functional person that is doing the work, and you're also the analyst getting all those details and putting that together so that way you can go in and build what they're asking for.
Yeah. And I think it works out sometimes. It's better because that way you're not playing a game of telephone. As soon as I hear something from the stakeholder and I jot that down, that requirement down, I know that I'm going to build that exact thing.
Right.
But other times, it's kind of like the old mantra where you don't test your own code. So, as I build something, I shouldn't be also testing it because, of course, I'm going to think it's right. I built it. I know how it's functioning. I think a lot of times it also helps to have that other person gathering those requirements. I heard it this way. I think this is what they meant. And you can disagree, but now at least you have that discourse of someone else who's also trying to help you gather those requirements and understand what exactly you're supposed to be building.
Right. The other way creates a bottleneck.
Right.
Where you are the one doing both of those roles, where if you were just doing building, you don't have to do a lot of the analysis and you can go in and ask clarifying questions without having to do all the upfront work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So are you doing any building of self-service tools? Like Cosmos has data sets and pulling in the different data cubes.
Yeah.
Anything
Yeah.
like
I
that?
think self-service is a contentious term, I think, with a lot of my colleagues.
Self-service, yeah.
Yeah, self-service, right? But yeah, I think for me, I'm all about it. I'm all about empowering citizen developers to do as much of my job, frankly, as they can. So that just means you have to have really strong governance. You have to make sure that your data sets, whatever you're exposing to end users, is tight, because as they go in, they're not going to really know what they're doing. They're just dragging and dropping stuff. They're kind of building some analyses. So making sure that you've got that kind of as tightened up as you can is super important to making sure self-service works. But yeah, I think that's great. Like a lot of times, data or IT teams, we're kind of seen as like the bottleneck to anything. Whereas we want to be partners. Like we want to be like, hey, we're getting this data. We're trying to surface it to you. So here it is. Like go out and, build some stuff and we'll help you with that. So that's kind of my outlook, is like, yeah, let's just give it to them and be partners.
We have one. Well, it's more of a statement than a question, but we're going to add a question mark to it. So Lachey was thinking about using Excel for some of her clients. It shows conversations from posts, and it is super clear, not fancy, but clear. So is there something on top of Excel that she could probably use, or do you find that just if Excel does the job, leave it as it stands?
Well, yeah, I think, Lachey, if your clients are happy with Excel, why overcomplicate it and create more work for yourself? So I think Excel is absolutely fine, but there's tons of free tools out there like Looker Data Studio. Power BI has a free desktop client you can install. MicroStrategy's got a free desktop client. So you can always have Excel as your data source and then just put something on top of it that's going to be a little bit sexier with graphs and things like that, more interactions with filtering and slicing data and things like that. But yeah, I mean, keep it simple, stupid. If Excel works, then Excel is the way to go.
Might not be great for presentation, but it's what people know.
Yeah.
I like keep it stupid simple. That way, you're not insulting anybody. You're just saying this is stupid simple. This is like you don't have to be smart at all to do this. You could just it's there for you.
There you go. That's smart.
Well, then, thank you. I think that helps. We are going to move on to our next segment and talk a little bit about confessions. So we're going to get honest and into your feels a little bit, Nash, if you're down with that.
I'm down.
All right.
And now it's time for BA Confessions.
All right. So this is the part of the show where we collect any sort of confessions from audience members, past participants, anybody that has said, hey, I've got something I want to share. And then luckily for us and not so much for you, if we don't have anything in the hopper, we get to then turn that around and kind of put you in the hot seat.
Okay.
So unfortunately for you, there's nothing. So then there's no data. We got no data. So then we get to ask you questions like, have you ever gone in and maybe accidentally deleted or added to someone's production data? Just learning.
Yeah, I mean, there's been plenty of times where I think the joke is, we develop in production. That's just kind of where it is. So we don't even have a dev. We don't have a test environment. We do everything right in prod.
Yeah.
I was just dealing with an issue with a dashboard that we were working on at a client. And one of my colleagues published something out to the Power BI service. And I go to log in this morning and I'm looking at it and it's completely blank. There's no data returned. And for those who aren't aware, Power BI, it does have like deployment pipelines, but it doesn't really have there's no framework for like environments. There's no like dev, migration to test to prod, unless you kind of set it up that way. So everything's live. So yeah, I get in there this morning and this dashboard that we've been working on for a while is completely blank. So that just sends me down a rabbit hole of, testing, figuring out what's going on. Luckily I think we were able to kind of like use an old version and fix the issue, but doing like update statements or something like that in SQL, forgetting to put a where clause on it, and overwriting tons of data you didn't want to do.
I don't feel like that one's on us though. Hold on. I feel like anytime that you write update, then SQL should automatically put a where clause in there for you, and then you can't even run it and execute it without that where clause.
I'd be down with that. I don't think there's probably ever a reason where you would want to mass update a column just because.
And even if you do, you write that explicitly in your where clause to say where everything equals everything, and then you're fine.
I got another one for you.
You got one, Steve?
Have you ever brought down production server with a query that you wrote? Cartesian joins or whatnot?
Yeah. I like a solid select star. I know that's it's a cardinal sin.
Yeah.
But it's easy and I like to write dirty SQL. So absolutely. I've ground a lot of systems to a halt with that. Mostly like on-prem, some of the on-prem older kind of legacy setups. Nowadays in the cloud, it's so scalable. It might not be affordable to run a massive query that just spins and spins and spins, but usually not going to bring anything down. But I mean, sometimes you're just messing around. You're not sure how big a table is. You do a select star, and before you know it, you've got millions of rows returning on this 100 column wide table. And I've had DBAs ping me before, like, "Hey, I'm killing your query," and I'm just like, "Okay, that's fair."
At least it was the query and not you. It's like,
it was implied. It was an implied statement. Like, I'm going to kill the query.
Yeah. Where do you sit specifically in the building?
Well, nowadays, I mean,
Work
public
from
record,
home.
you can find out where I sit, but
Yeah, it's fair.
Near a window, is there any defenestration going on?
Do I have windows? So you said near me?
No, sometimes when DBAs come looking, they want to find you near a window.
Oh
So
yeah,
they can
well that's
drop you
what
on it.
I'm like. I got windows right here. There's probably old DBAs from my past actually watching right now. You'll see like a laser, kind of like tracing around my head pretty soon.
Still alive? I'll fix this. And drop Bober. Yeah. And that's all of the database puns I'll make today. At least it's not drop star Bober, because like that's just the whole family goes.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't do that.
Can't do that.
Just where equals dad. That's it.
Where equals dad. I like it. That's awesome.
Not like dad, equals dad.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
Well, if you have your own confessions, so then you can go into Analysts After Dark, check out and submit your own BA confessions where maybe you've dropped the production table, you've added I've done some automation myself that's ran for a couple days. And then luckily Power Automate has like a clause now where, they kill it yourself, but like it's going in and it's like, oh, that's still running. Interesting. Okay. So I get it. But if you have your own, feel free to go on to analystsafterdark.com and submit your own BA confession. And with that, sir, it is last call. So that means that we get to figure out what you've got going on. So do you have any upcoming projects? What do you have going on? Where can people find you if they want to talk about more about data, do all that kind of fun stuff?
Yeah. Nothing. I say low key. I say huddled in my cold Midwest abode, but yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. Okay. I'm probably the only Nash Bober you're going to find out there, so I don't think you have to worry about that. But yeah, always open to talk about some data, anything with the corporatocracy that we all live under right now, or just anything else that you want to talk about that's not work related. I'm also always down for that as well.
So I assume politics is working out still big in the Bober house?
I do. I enjoy a nice workout. That's probably why I'm so tired. I usually get up like before 5 o'clock in the morning to get it done before the kids get out of bed. So
fair.
That's my excuse for why I'm sleeping at 8 o'clock. Not that I'm getting old.
I like it.
Old is a state of mind.
Exactly.
This has been awesome. I love talking about data just because I deal with it a lot, and I don't feel a lot of people have the same sort of mentality that you do, right? Or the same level of directness to say, hey, you screwed this up and you need to fix it.
Yeah.
But so I appreciate that, and being able to talk with somebody else that I know has experienced the same level of pain that I have, probably on a more intense scale, I would imagine.
It's fun. It's interesting. Every day usually can bring a new challenge. And it's kind of like the good days are when it's like figuring out a puzzle, right? You got this problem, you're banging your head on the keyboard, you have no idea what's going on. You finally figure it out, and it's like this giant sense of relief, and it's like a little dopamine hit. But there's then those days where you just sit there and you're like, what am I doing? Why am I not in the Alps, in a tiny chateau somewhere, just away from the world? So, yeah. Mentally, I stay in the Alps in a chateau.
Love it. Yeah. That's your safe spot. That's your fortress of solitude.
That's it.
All right.
Disney princess songs going on in the background too?
Yeah, tons of nothing but Disney songs in this house. And it's not the Aladdin soundtrack, Steve, but we did recently get Disney Plus, so maybe I'll throw on Aladdin and we'll see what we got. See if it still hits like it did when I was a kid.
Oh jeez.
Is there anything that you would like to leave for other analysts watching the show to say, hey, if you do this, make sure that you do it this way, or don't do this? Any guidelines around data that you want to leave with the guests?
I think more than anything, it's important to be curious. Data is not going anywhere. Everything is data. Everything you look at, there's data points. The Internet of Things is constantly producing data points. So, it's kind of like, as far as job stability, I know everyone's really worried about AI right now and what AI is going to do. I'm not really worried about that. We'll worry about that when it actually comes to fruition. But there's always going to be data. There's always going to need people to ask good questions and actually get value out of that data, because I can give you a billion rows of data in an Excel sheet, but if you aren't someone who can actually pull out the trends and the story and help someone understand what that is, there's really no value there. So yeah, stay curious. And also, I think super important, soft skills. I pretty much think I can train people to do anything I want them to do, but when I'm looking at colleagues or hiring someone or whatever, I want to know, do I want to work with this person? Is this someone who I can relate to on some level? Are they personable? Are they going to ask good questions? Are they going to make people trust them? Because I think a lot of times you fall into that trap of people who are technically strong, but they just kind of want to sit by themselves in a corner and just hammer down on whatever they're working on and don't really want to be bothered. So you have to have that social aspect to be a really successful analyst.
Well, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you, Nash. It's been great, chatting with you again. It's been too long for sure. So we'll need to make sure that we revisit these conversations on a more frequent basis.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it, guys. And yeah, anytime, just reach out.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you tune in again in 2 weeks for another fantastic guest on Analysts After Dark. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and check us out on analystsafterdark.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Bye, guys.